di tahun ini. Before we begin, let me just say a few things about the Indonesia program that I coordinate. Indonesia's defense and military developments have always been at the core of the Indonesia program's research at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. In 2022, our program staff published two major publications on the topic of Indonesia's defense. First, Jefferson Ng from the Indonesia program and Yudha Kurniawan from Bakri University published an article on parliamentary oversight over the Indonesian Armed Forces for the journal Armed Forces and Society. We also have an article written by our Indonesia program staff, Adi Priyamarziki, and former Indonesia program research analyst, Sigit Nugroho, together with one of our speakers here this morning, Muhammad Haripin from Indonesia's National Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN, on the topic of Indonesia's Ministry of Defense under the Jokowi presidency for the Asian Journal of Comparative Politics. This follows a special issue of the Journal of Asian Security and International Affairs, which we edited in December 2021 on Indonesia's foreign and maritime policies under Joko Widodo, which also covered a range of defense and security issues, including the current state of Indonesian strategic thinking. For the subject matter that we want to discuss this morning and this afternoon, let me give a short overview of what our objectives are. It has been almost 14 years since the Indonesian Armed Forces, the TNI, first embarked on its defense modernization drive back in 2009 under the Minimum Essential Force Program. The program is scheduled to be completed in 2024, and hence we conduct this online workshop to further understand the most recent developments in Indonesia's defense and strategic thinking. Our workshop this morning will explore three interrelated topics: military operations other than war, Indonesia's defense modernization and the role of the defense industry, and post-MEF defense development. At this time, I particularly want to thank Lab 45 Jakarta, especially Bapak Is Gindarsa, for working together with my program colleagues and I to conduct this workshop. Let me just give a brief introduction to our speakers for today. For the first session, we have Bapak Major General Johnny Marosa, Vice Rector of Academic Affairs of Defense University of the Republic of Indonesia, UNHAN RI, and Dr. Muhammad Haripin, Research Coordinator of Conflict, Security and Defense Studies at the Research Center for Politics of Indonesia's National Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN, or previously known as LIPI. Next, we have Dr. Yono Reksoprojo, Head of Transfer of Technology and Offsets of the Defense Industry Policy Committee, KKIP, of the Indonesian Ministry of Defense, and Dr. Kuri Maharani, lecturer at Bina Nusantara University. And the last two speakers would be speaking at our afternoon session. Our keynote speaker this morning is Bapak Andi Wijoyanto, who was appointed governor of the National Resilience Institute by President Joko Widodo on 21st February 2022. Prior to this, he served as senior advisor to the Presidential Chief of Staff from 2016 to 2022. Prior to that appointment, he was Cabinet Secretary in President Widodo's Cabinet Kerja 2014 to 2015. Bapak Andi is also well known as a leading expert on Indonesia's defense and military affairs, military transformation, defense strategy, and defense economics are some of his areas of expertise. Now, let me invite my colleague, Professor Ang Cheng Guan, Associate Dean, RSIS, to deliver his welcome address. Prof. Ang, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Bapa Andi Wijayanto, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Executive Deputy Chairman of the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, RSIS, Ambassador Ong King Yong, who is unable to be present today, and the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, I would like to welcome you to this RSIS Lab 45 joint workshop. It is an honor for me to open the RSIS Lab 45 joint workshop on Indonesia's Defense and Security Outlook 2023. In the recent years, TNI have underwent major organizational changes and modernization, including the integration of new weapon platforms, as well as organizational restructuring. One of the most successful examples of this reorganization is the realization of the Joint Regional Defense Command, a new operational command in the TNI tasked with the integration of the three services for joint combat operations in designated geographical areas. Meanwhile, the increasingly uncertain international and regional context poses significant medium and long-term challenges for Indonesia. The likelihood of great power conflict in flashpoints in Asia is growing, and the TNI needs to be prepared to respond to a potential conflict. In addition, Indonesia is now steadily recovering from the COVID-19 outbreak. During the break of the pandemic, the TNI was deployed by the national government to support its COVID-19 management efforts, reflecting the TNI's prominent role in military operations rather than war. Against this backdrop, this workshop will explore three interrelated topics: military operations other than war, Indonesia's defense modernization, and the role of the defense industry and the post-MEF defense development. We are privileged to have Major General Johnny Marosa, Dr. Muhammad Haripin, Dr. Yono Roksoprojo, and Dr. Kuri Maharani to examine the defense and security outlook for Indonesia in 2023. We are also privileged to have Bapa Andi Wijayanto to deliver his keynote speech for this workshop. Lastly, we would like to thank Lab 45 Jakarta for working with the Indonesia program team at RSIS to realize this workshop. I wish you all a fruitful workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Ang. Now it gives me great pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Bapa Andi Wijayanto, to deliver his keynote address. Bapa Andi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Leonard. It's always a pleasure to see you again. Thank you, Professor Ang Cheng Guan, for your introductory remark. And I also congratulate my colleague, Mas Iis Gindarsa Gigin, to coordinate a webinar between Rajaratnam School of International Studies as well with Lab 45. Yeah. I just attended Rapim Kemhan, Defense Ministry meeting 2 days ago. Yeah, at that meeting, President Jokowi asked our defense minister to gather all strategic intelligence, especially related with geopolitical dynamics in 2023. I think for the first time for Rapim Kemhan, I heard that kind of outward-looking direction from our president. President described 9 global economic variables that needed to be analyzed this year by Ministry of Defense. These 9 economic variables related, for example, with monetary stability in the world, especially related to the situation in the US, what happened in Turkey, Argentina, and so on. President also described in very detail his worry on global supply chain disruption, especially related to the strategic commodities such as energy and food. Yeah, of course, this is related to escalation of conflict between Russia and Ukraine. President also described on technological rivalry between China and US related to the chip war, yeah, between industry in both countries. And President also described 5 political variable, 5 global political variable. He mentioned Russia-Ukraine. He mentioned China, Taiwan. He mentioned political stability related to the scheduled national election in major countries such as Argentina, Turkey. In our region, maybe Thailand, Cambodia, and of course, Myanmar. He also mentioned the potential escalation of cyber war in 2023. Again, an outward looking for defense outlook in 2023. He mentioned also our national outlook, of course. Yeah, he believed that our economic foundation will be strong enough to tackle global dynamic, but he also stressed in the importance of us to really focus on the escalation of national politics ahead of 2024 election. These are Pak Jokowi direction for Ministry of Defense this week. Yeah, I attended the meeting, and Pak Prabowo asked me to prepare several recommendations for Ministry of Defense. Yeah, I propose 3 main things. Yeah, the first time is the creation of a kind of national defense intelligence task force controlled by Pak Prabowo to analyze the global geopolitical landscape, especially related with that 9 and 5 variables mentioned by President. I think, Pak Leonard, if we can have a kind of research collaboration on this 14 geopolitical issue between Indonesia and Singapore, between RSIS, Lab 45, and also my institution Lamanas, it will be great in creating a kind of a more comprehensive understanding what will happen in our geopolitical landscape for 2023. Yeah, Pak Prabowo asked us at Lamanas to really focus on the worst case scenario and how to mitigate that worst case scenario. Well, we have to hunt the black swan and figure out how to kill that black swan in 2023. That's our main job. So the first recommendation is the creation of a kind of strategic intelligence task force controlled by defense minister. Yeah. The second one is related to how we can optimize our regional security architecture. Yeah, we realize we have many regional security cooperation that create a kind of multi-layer architecture. The biggest one, of course, the ASEAN Regional Forum. Yeah, we have ASEAN Regional Forum started from 1994, I believe. Yeah, ASEAN Regional Forum focus on three pillars: CBM, preventive diplomacy, and also conflict resolution. With the dynamic of geopolitical landscape in 2023, I think we really have to focus on how, again, to strengthen CBM and also preventive diplomacy, in fighting major countries in our region to again discuss hardcore military issue as well as non-traditional security issue, to have a more reliable dialogue mechanism between major countries in East Asia. Yeah, just yesterday I have a meeting with Deputy Secretary for Policy from our colleague in Defense Ministry of Australia. Yeah, he visited Jakarta for 3 days, and he had a chance to meet me at Manas. We discussed many issues related to Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, and of course also the technological partnership between Australia, UK, and US in the form of AUKUS. So we realized that this is a good starting point for us to really deepening our Indonesia-Australia defense cooperation under Lombok Treaty. And with him, I also discussed that Indonesia and Singapore, in Indonesian side, we already fulfill our responsibility to ratify both FIR and also defense cooperation agreement. So both FIR and defense cooperation agreement can be ready implemented starting this year. And our success in ratifying defense cooperation agreement between Indonesia and Singapore in the late of 2022 indicated that this defense cooperation issue is no longer considered as controversial, political, sensitive issue for Indonesian politics. So this is really a good starting point both for Indonesia, Singapore, and also maybe involving Australia to deepening defense cooperation between us in the region. Yeah, we also very positive on the possibility between Indonesia and Vietnam to complete the sea border agreement. Yeah, this year. Yeah, we hope it can enhance stability, especially in South China Sea. We also now discuss the probability between Indonesia and Malaysia to establish a kind of joint development in exploiting our potential resources, oil and gas, especially around the North Kalimantan area. Yeah. So this kind of, I think, issue will be very important, but we need to strengthen the existing regional security architecture based on ASEAN, especially ASEAN Regional Forum, to reduce the tension between major power in our region. The last thing, the third thing, President also mentioned the necessity for Indonesia to adopt new development of technology. I think the use of hypersonic missile in Ukraine, the use of combination between cyber attack and synergy with the kinetic army operation in Ukraine. We have to discuss that. The new terminology in our military operational level, such as hybrid war, such as gray zone, or for example, multi-domain operation. Yeah, we need to discuss this in more detail. And I just read several new revision of wargaming methodology published, for example, by CSIS Washington DC. Yeah, this new wargaming simulation really focus on Pacific War. Yeah, try to study the experience of Japan-US Pacific War and try to relate that experience with the projection of the coming new Pacific War between US and China. Again, we have so many things that we can discuss between Indonesia and Singapore. I hope the webinar today, early 2023, will be the starting point to enhance, to deepen research collaboration between Indonesia and Singapore using the good interaction between Pak Leonard and Pak Gigin from Raja Ratnam School and also Lab 45. Thank you, Pak Leonard, for the opportunity for me to recommend several possibility for us to deepening our research collaboration in 2023. Selamat pagi.
Thank you very much, Papa Andi, for offering us such superb insights on Indonesian defense and security trends and proposing a number of cooperation initiatives that we look forward to follow up between the Indonesia program and Lab 45. We really appreciate your presence here today, and we are very honored to be able to maintain our contact with Lemhanas, and we wish you a successful year ahead. Thank you very much. Now may I invite Mbak Rainier from Lab 45 to moderate the morning session, and we look forward to a fruitful workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Leonard Sebastian. And I also want to thank Professor An Chung Kwan for the remarks, as well as to Mr. Andi Wijayanto on the insightful 2023 Defense Outlook for the keynote speech. So greetings to everyone. As introduced, my name is Reina, and I'm from Lab 45. Today, I have the honor to be the moderator for today's first session of the joint webinar from RSIS and Lab 45. And because we have limited time, I will just jump in now. And it is tremendous pleasure today that in this session, we get to learn from the two wonderful speakers who have a deep knowledge on the Indonesian National Armed Forces and the military operations other than war, or MOOTW. Or in Indonesian, we call it as TNI dan OMSP, ya, Operasi Militer Selain Perang. And we have here Bapak Major General Joni Maroza from Republic of Indonesia Defense University, or UNHAN RI, who will share his thought first on the pandemic management and future challenges for the implementation of MOOTW, and then followed by Dr. Muhammad Haripin from the National Research and Innovation Agency, or BRIN, that will be focusing on the impact and the future role past the pandemic era for the TNI. But maybe before we start, I would like to gently remind everyone, all the attendees, that you may leave your questions anytime during the presentation. Just type in on the Zoom Q&A section, and also the comment box if you are currently on YouTube. And I will have the time to read your questions during the discussion session at the end. And that's all from me now. Bapak Major Joni, please, the screen will be yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Rin. Can I share my screen? Is it okay?
Oke, Bapak.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you again, moderator. Very good morning, Pak Leonard, Pak Gubernur Lemanas, Pak Andi Wijayanto, speakers and all participants. It's a great honor for me to be invited to this workshop to talk about TNI and military operation out of the war. Okay. Let me close the card. I was asked to talk about three things. Firstly, the logic and driver behind the military operation out of the war. Secondly, about the roles of TNI in COVID-19 responses, and lastly, about the prospects and challenges to the implementation of military operation out of the war. Before I talk about 3 points, let me mention a couple of statements that is my general proposition as an introduction. My first statement is that military operation out of the war around the world is something very common. It is also legal and even necessary, especially in times of crisis, as we have seen how this has been demonstrated very clearly during COVID-19 pandemic. Around the world, most of countries mobilized their militaries as an important component in the interagency or the whole of government affairs. On the other hand, we also recognize that some observers are concerned that excessive military operation at the war might reduce military professionalism to perform its primary duty and is the chance for military intervention in politics. I think this is a very valid concerns, but I think also how do we reconcile this between the reality and expectation in our analysis. Perhaps the right questions about military operation at the war should not be about whether, but about how or how much. That would lead us to the question of what need to be paid attention in our analysis. I mean, maybe what we should pay attention to. Maybe how the military is mobilized, to what degree, and to achieve what objectives, for example. Let me begin my presentation about the logic and the driver. Some prominent and classic literature about civil-military relations, like Samuel S. Finnan, who wrote The Man on the Horseback, or the book of Samuel Huntington, Soldiers and States, a long time in 1954, explain how military involves in withdrawals from politics by using structural factors. They generally groups this factor into two groups. One is internal factors and another is external factor. Internal factors include history of military establishment, military organizational experience, values, self-perception about its position in society, and leaders' personal ambition. Whereas external factors include the political stability and maturity, government effectiveness, civilian politician views and attitude toward the military, and also changing geopolitics, all of which are called societal factors. The internal factors are also called push factors, meaning that the initiation to involve in politics pushed from the internal military, while external or societal factors are called pull factors. But I think this way of explaining military involvement in politics may be not enough to be used for explaining the military operation under the war, because the context is different. I mean, in military operation under the war, all government agencies work mostly with the guidance of specific law and regulation, and many types of them are temporary and very time specific. So I tried to conceptualize a framework by taking into account also the interplays between the legal aspects, the military and the government, to understand how each types of military operation under the law are being decided in the policy making process, to understand the logic or the drive, the mobilization of military in military operation under the law from a legal perspective. To explain further, let me explain briefly the legal basis for military operation under the war. Maybe this has been many times explained. I mean, most of you may be familiar, probably, but was involved in the formulation of this law. So I will be brief in my description. But I think law number 3, 2002 about national defense mentioned that when it comes to non-military threats, it is the government ministries or agencies that become the main elements to be responsible for, to lead the response, depends on the type and form of threats. For example, for disaster reliefs, we have National Agency for Disaster Management. For counter-terrorism, for national crimes, we have the police and immigration offices as the leading elements, while the rest are supporting elements, including the TNI. And further, in the decree number 8, the presidential decree number 8, 2021, there is a table of 7 dimensions and details of 48 types of military threats, which agencies are responsible for dealing with which types of threats. So with regard to the TNI, some types explicitly mentioned in supporting elements, in some others implicitly included, as there is always at the end of each list mentioned related institutions. So it could be many institutions, more than what they have in the list. And also, I think I need to to mention that this law number 3, 2002, is the product of a democratic regime, that the substance has reflected democratic norms and values in terms of military operation other than war. It is very much different from the previous era, where some types of military operation were parts of the social political function of the armed forces. We call it fungsi, fungsi sosial dan politik. The armed forces could execute the operation automatically without request or civilian political decision. Now, with this new law, all forms of military operations that are related especially to the civilian domains of responsibility are based on or decided through political decision. In this slide, I'll try to further characterize the types of military operation based on the law number 30, 2004, with 4 quadrants in terms of actors and in terms of times. I divided into purely military operation and joint military and civilian, where there are some non-military institutions involved. And also in terms of the times, long-term, regular, compared to temporary, conditional, based on a spectrum and scale of the threats. So what I'm trying to show here is they should be understood and treated differently. Maybe a little bit confusing, because I kept the number of JIT types as it is on the original text. So it doesn't start with 1, 2, 3 and start with 4. So what I need to explain here, I think, is if they are purely military operation, meaning no other institution involved, carried out regularly for a long time, then there are SOPs that the military can follow. If it is purely military, but only temporarily, like separatism, rebellion, terrorism, the military at some points must wait for a political decision, depends on the scale and the types of operation. In the military, we recognize some operation like intelligence operation, combat operation, and territorial operation. That depends on the scale and spectrum of the threats. They are different in the use of instruments and scale. It's become a little bit complex when the military assisting here. Definitely, the military must wait for the request and or political decision. When it is long-term and regular, there are some SOPs to follow. But when it's or there's no SOPs that 100% cover all of these types of operations. So the reason is because you never know what will happen. So, for example, assisting the local government or civilian government could be many different types of operations. So just like is in Decree number 8, 2021, there are so many of them. There are 47 types of threats. So with that, I would get into the next part of presentation about the roles of TNI in COVID-19 pandemic. I would start by an interesting sorry, maybe I skip. Yes, maybe an interesting study by Fozia Gibson in 2021 that shows the emerging trends in global civil military engagement. What interesting for me is Indonesia is put into military-led response from these three trends. One is minimal technical military support, blended civil military response, and military-led response. So Indonesia is included in the third one. So which means military leadership in response planning, coordination, emergency hospital, contact tracing, surveillance, and so on. So I agree to some extent, but some activities at TNI was leading operation, but at some other it was not. Maybe not all of them. So let me share with you the organization structure of the national response to COVID-19 to clarify the military-led response, third trend conceptualized by Fozia Gibson. The left chart shows that the structure based on Presidential Decree number 82, there's no active military officers or institution at the top of leadership. At the Presidential Decree number 9, on the right side, we see Chief Operational was appointed as deputy for within the task force for COVID-19 response. So the leadership level, it may be not military response, maybe some of the operational or tactical, but especially for security lead operation, but not in some other domains, which is purely medical, for example. The next slides, what I like to do in this presentation is I tried to study the push and pull factors, the predetermined themes that I took from the civil military relations concept, the drive and the logic how I was involved in the COVID-19 pandemic response. I found that mainly it was for pull factors, the government assessment of the crisis. So, including the assessment about the understanding of the military capacity and the civilian institution and agency are not enough capacity to respond to the crisis. I compare to the institutional legacy, historical experience, self-perception, leaders' political ambitions. I try to look at the publication and documents and news publication. Rarely I found that this is internal to the military that drive the involvement of the military in the COVID-19 pandemic response. So I come to the conclusion that pull factors is much more than push factor. I'm not saying that there's no influence from the military. The willingness of the military to get involved in that response because of understanding about the duty and the responsible to secure, protect the people. But it has come to the decision-making process is mainly pull factors, I think, is much more dominant. Let me show you a little bit about how the TNI contributes to the pandemic response. That includes military hospitals and medical personnel directly involved in the COVID-19 pandemic treatment, distribution of medical equipment, vaccination, and tracing monitoring. So with regard to the hospital, we have the TNI has 4% of the hospitals in Indonesia, and also we have some field hospital that can be used for the treatment. And we involve 33,500 doctors and 105,000 nurses. And we used also some military equipment for evacuation and distribution of equipment and drugs, medicines to around the country. And we also assign 200 vaccination per day carried out by military medical personnel and nurses, and are involved in medicines, in vaccination, and also we deploy around 95,000 personnel as part of the task force to carry out tracing. Let me tell you that the military operation other than war is it's a bit vague concept. I mean, there's no clear definition about how do we limit the to specify the types of. I have no problems understanding military operation in the fight against separatism, for example, where there is a military operation, right? But it's a bit complicated when we talk about pandemic. For example, the use of military hospitals, military pharmacies, research on vaccine and other activities, which is available to publics. Are they included in a military operation other than war or not? I mean, so it's a bit complicated. And the problem is in the law and regulation, all are included. So including like assisting civilian government or local governments without specifying what kind of operation is that for the military operation. Or maybe some purely civic mission, but it's not like military operation using military equipment, something like that. The obvious example is like using military hospital. Is that military operations? can we say that military operation other than war? But we use hospital, right? So something quite a complicated definition. This slide show more about the roles of TNI in COVID-19 using about the rules. It's classified into 3 sectors, which is health sector, security sector, and socio-economic sector, and also Ministry of Defense focus more on the agency cooperation and international cooperation, domestic and international. I put question mark about the impact because not much studies carried out about this. I mean, the impacts on the way we think about the defense strategic planning, about how the military is to be built and used in the future, especially how to integrate the possible obvious non-military threats like CBR and cyber, climate change, and so on in defense strategic planning. So I can only tell you what we do in Defense University, learning from the COVID-19 Ministry of Defense, established 10 new undergraduate study programs, including military medicine, military pharmacies, 4 engineering programs with military engineering, and also military math and science study. That is to respond, and it's a long-term to prepare human resource management, human resource for the non-military threats. So, but I can tell you that the process of establishing these programs is not easy. It's mainly because the ideas of establishing these study programs did not share among other stakeholders, such as Ministry of Education, who mainly use a different consideration in normal conditions, normal condition consideration, including market consideration and something not related to security. So, so it's a bit debate between the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Education and other stakeholders. Is not an easy process, but we have now that changed the study programs that it's used for especially to respond in the future for non-military threats.
Bapak Majanjani, pardon me, you have 3 more minutes left.
Okay, 3 more minutes. Thank you. So the last part of my presentation is about the prospect and challenges. So I tried to classify it also not to the prospect for all of the military operation other than war, purely military and joint military civilian, but mostly and in general, I think it's most likely to continue with similar patterns with increased capacity. I believe that the military operation other than war should use the available assets and instrument used for primary duty of the military. I mean, we don't need to buy new or different. It should be something like a side job is beside the primary duty. The challenges are mainly when we talk about separatism, rebellion, and terrorism. The challenge is how to avoid a human rights issue, and for the C, for assisting the local government, civilian government, military. The challenge about civil military relations. Also, I think that is the issue normally we found in the literature and the reference. But I think for others like assisting police for coming because of disaster displacement and rescues, search and rescue, that mainly about civic instead of as civil military cooperation. So we talk about management, the effectiveness of how instead of the politics like civil military relations, more about the politics about who control who's, whether the civilians control or the whole process for decision making and the implementation of implementation of the military operation other than war. And the last slide connected to the challenge. I think the generally what I see is we lack of strategy. I mean, for example, if CBRN is the next threat and military operation other than war is the policy choice, then how should we analyze it comprehensively? I mean, we talk about strategy, we talk about something comprehensive, purposeful, long-term, coherent, and interactive. So, I mean, how do we assess about national and domestic context which relates to our CBRN? How do we analyze our ends mean threats and opportunities to our national interests, as well as our power and influence that we post, and to be translated into our instruments? How to translate the ends into feasible and desirable objectives? How do we structurally prioritize them? And how do we convert power influence into reliable and sustainable instruments and use them in suitable manners as the course of action in achieving the objectives? Then we would be, what would be the leadership challenges to formalize this strategy into implementable policy? And also, how do we measure costs? There are so many questions that we need to ask. I mean, when we formulate a strategy about the non-military threats or military operation other than war as a policy choice. So that is that I see generally not enough systematic, comprehensive strategy that we need to deal with this military operation other than war in the future. I think that's all what I'd like to say is a conclusion. I think military operation in Indonesia is not unique. It just follow around the world, and legalized and government policy was the objective assessment. Military operation and war in Indonesia should be understood case by case because of various characteristics. Each has otherwise will risk offer generalization and misleading. So I'd like to what I did in my characterization of the military operation other than war is for that purpose. Some are concerned with civil military relation politics, civil supervision, some with CIMIC, interagency management, some others internal military as operation national parliament. So there is a significant change in the defense strategic planning that reflect whether we have learned properly from the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you. I stop here. I return the screen to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Bapak Maijen Joni, for the in-depth presentation on the role of TNI around military operations other than war. Maybe if I may reiterate a bit of your conclusion, we can take that MOOTW in Indonesia follows common practices globally, but in practice, it should be understood case by case. And maybe second, we have focus on the CMR, and then CIMIC, and also SOPs. And lastly, maybe no significant change in the defense strategic planning because of the pandemic. And before we move on to the second speaker, I would like to remind again that everyone is welcome on the Zoom Q&A section or on the YouTube comment box. Just type in the questions and we will discuss it after the presentation. And now we have Dr. Haripin here, who has prepared an interesting presentation on how the pandemic has impacted the TNI as well as civic-military relations and the future prospects. Dr. Haripin, for 20 minutes, the screen is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mbak Rini. And also I would like to thank RSIS Indonesia Program and Lab 45 for the invitation. I really enjoyed the presentation of Pak Joni because it has made my it will make my presentation much easier because Pak Joni has already discussed has covered many areas of military operation other than war. But my topic for today is I'm going to talk about a little bit about the post-COVID-19 TNI, particularly about the TNI military operation other than war. So,
Bapak Haripin, sorry, I just got a note from the committee that Pak Joni will be leaving soon. So maybe can I borrow the screen for a bit? There's a question for Bapak Joni, and we can continue to your presentation. Yeah, so sorry, Pak.
okay.
Just get the notes
No,
from the
it's
committee. Yeah,
okay.
because
No problem
Bapak Mejen
at all.
Joni, yeah, saya have another agenda after this. So Bapak Joni,
Sure,
we
sure, it's
come
okay.
back again to you. So sorry, we got notes from.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, we have a few questions for Bapak Joni. First of all, does the TNI's force structure support MOOTW? So how is the joint doctrine maybe affect the TNI's MOOTW operations, maybe including how to make sure that TNI is not overusing their military force, maybe when dealing with civilians during MOOTW? That's the first question. And also the second one is how ready is Indonesia against the CBRN threat? Maybe that's the two questions before you leave. We are holding you for a bit to answer the questions. Please, Bapak Mejen Joni, you have time.
Okay. Thank you. That's a very good questions. So my understanding about the question how not to use military forces in dealing with the civilians. Yeah, I think we have absolutely TNI has a standard operation procedure for each of types of military operation at the wars. Depends on what types of are you talking about. I will talk about communal conflicts, assisting the police for law and order, for example. Of course, we use non-lethal equipment, but of course, again, it depends on the scale and the spectrum. This is a big chaos, and the country is about to collapse. It's a big nationwide. I think there's no guarantee that it's not going to use the equipment, right? So, if the scale and the spectrum is just small, maybe we just use the military personnel as a backup. But we need to talk about rebellion or separatism, the different case. So I think we should look at this case by case, each type of military operations, the 14 of 56 types of military threats, non-military threats in the decree. So I think we should not overgeneralize how we should deal with it. And second, about the CBRN, what is the question again? Sorry.
How prepared the TNI for the CBRN threat?
Yes, that is a good question as well. So we have some unit and instrument, the TNI structure dealing with, but I can mention that it's not at a scale of enough to deal with scale of CBRN threats like pandemic, this nationwide threats. So if, for example, we have the nuclear dust around the world, around the country, from incidents from South China Sea conflict or from Ukraine, I can assure that we don't have enough equipment to distribute. We have limited nuclear mask. We have limited equipment and protective outfits. I think we need to think about this one. How do we do evacuation? How do isolation to isolate the people, the citizen, to a secure place, and to distribute all this protective equipment. Something like this, I think, need to be thought about in the strategic planning. But we did start begin to think about this one, but in the implementation need to be a bit supported by all of the stakeholders involved in this the strategic planning. Is that answering the question?
Yeah, I think so. But Pak, do you still have time to have one follow-up questions, maybe to answer one more?
Okay.
We have one more question. It's actually a follow-up. So maybe from your own point of view, your own yourself as a part of the TNI and also as a part of the academia, how should TNI ideally improve in their defense strategic planning or enhance the posture of the MOOTW post-COVID-19? Maybe we are expecting from your own point of view as the TNI and also academia. Maybe you can add the answer for that.
I think, thank you. Good question as well. Maybe Arifin will talk about this one a bit further. But from my point of view, in our strategic planning, in defense strategic planning, especially, we should think about our Sis-Hankam Rata, right? In more deeply, more deliberate way of thinking about how can we implement national defense system. How do we integrate into all of the, including military operation other than like CBRN or cyber or climate change? You know, how do we in the slide that I put, how do we think about it comprehensively, thinking strategically, assessing our assumption very carefully about the threats, and then means and way, equipment, instrument, which is very specific, very specific objective, because you know, there's too many objectives, you don't have such strategy, right? So how do we use this way of strategic thinking for each types of or each type of operation in military operation other. Yeah.
Maybe do you think we should have new regulations to regulate the MOTW that itself, or maybe new areas of cooperation with the regional architecture? Maybe what do you think about it?
There is debates about whether we need to amend our law number 3, 2002 and law number 4, 2004 about the TNI. I think with regard to military operation other than war and non-military threats, I think, yeah, we need to be more specific about what types of it. So on one way, it's good because it's very open, right? So assisting a civilian government or local government, but it's very open. It's good because you don't know what it's going to happen to feature, what types of assistance that the government needs. But on the other hand, if you don't have specific types of operations, type of assistance, that means it's impossible for you to do a planning about how you're going to plan it, right? Is it to open, right? How you're going to, which kind of instrument you're going to use, what kind of SOPs that you're going to create for this step. So I think I like this discussion, but this discussion continue, right? So whether we are going to need to amend this law and regulation about military operation.
Okay, thank you, Pak. I think we should assess the situation first, yeah, before we take a further step. I think we can conclude a bit about that. So maybe, Pak, I think if you can join us again later, maybe, who knows, you can join us in the question and answer session, or maybe we would have to bid you goodbye first because you have another agenda. We have maybe Pak Leonard want to say a bit before Pak General. Major General Johnny leave us this morning.
Thank you so much, Major General Bapak Johnny. It's such a pleasure to have you with us, and we wish you well and look forward to your further collaboration with the Indonesia program RSIS. We look forward to meeting you in Jakarta soon, hopefully.
Sure, we will. Thank you, Leonard, Dr. Leonard Sebastian, for inviting me. That's my pleasure. I apologize for I have to leave this for because I have an agenda. Yeah. Okay. I will see you again next time. So, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bapak
Brain,
Wijaya
Pak Arifin.
Joni and Bapak Leonard as well. Now we have all the time for Bapak Dr. Muhammad Haripin, Pak. Now the screens is yours, so you can have the time for your presentation. We really apologize that we disrupted your presentation earlier, so you can have the screen now, Pak. Thank you.
No problem at all, Mbak Rini. I really, I also want to hear the answer from Pak Joni, so it is really not a problem for me to postpone the presentation. So I will continue my my early introduction, but however, well today I'm going to talk about the post-COVID-19 TNI. Well, the disclaimer is that I'm taking maybe a more critical perspective than Pak Joni. So there will be some critical notes about the military operation in war during the COVID-19 and how the mission is likely to happening in the future. So that's the general idea of my presentation today. As for the structure, this is the structure of my talk. The first one is basically introduction. So I will continue what has been discussed by Pak Joni, but I will add some political aspects or some political context of the TNI missions in a domestic setting. The second one, the second part is about the security and development challenges that have shaped and I think will continue to shape the TNI and also particularly the military operation under the war in the future. And the third part is I will try to show you the impacts of those challenges on civil military relations. And last but not least, the prospect, I will offer some critical points to be considered when we talk about or when we anticipate what will be going on in the future regarding with the military operation other than war. So for this occasion, I have prepared a short paper. So this is actually only for my guidance, so I can focus on my topic and do not talk about anything else. So I will try to will do my best to stick with the substance. So here in the first slide, we can see that according to the law on TNI, the Indonesian National Forces is responsible to conduct two missions. The first one is the warfighting missions against foreign adversaries. And the aim of this mission is to deter armed attack from hostile power, obviously. And the second mission is what we generally call in Indonesia OMSP, Operasi Militer Selain Perang, or military operation other than war. And as we can see from the slide here, there are 14 types of MOTW that constitute the main duty of TNI non-defense missions. But however, beyond this legal context, I think we need to understand that, or I think to better understand the domestic mission of the TNI, I think we need to realize that ever since the establishment of TNI in 1945, the Indonesian military has primarily been concerned with internal security matters, particularly counterinsurgency. And as can be seen from the military archive, the majority of TNI missions are domestic-oriented in nature. Furthermore, we also need to understand that looking at the numbers of both war and other than war missions, the Indonesian Army remains the most active and dominant service. Naturally, the Indonesian Army has the largest personnel among other services. Therefore, frequent deployment on internal mission had given the Army immense opportunity to gain political power in influencing decision-making process. We see this pattern throughout the presidency of Suharto, and I argue it continues until today. Indonesia's pursuit of high economic growth and social order, which placed domestic political stability as the government's main priority, has further helped the army to cement its primacy within Indonesian politics. In this regard, I think it is impossible to talk about the MOTW without taking into account the army and its political influence in Indonesia nowadays. Okay, we have problem here with my text. Okay, okay, to discuss the security, to discuss the post-COVID-19 challenges, and related to that is the future role of TNI. I think we can take a look at the Vision 2045, a document prepared and published by Bappenas, the National Development Planning Agency. There we can see what the current government, Joko Widodo administration, envision as the challenges and prospects Indonesia must address in order to become a more prosperous and secure nation state. Okay, but I think, wait a minute, I think there is some problem with my laptop here. Wait a minute.
Do you need us to present for you? Maybe.
Oh, no. There is some pop-up. Okay then, okay, yeah.
Okay, everything's good, or
Yeah.
you need our help?
No,
Okay,
no, it's okay.
that's good.
Okay.
Thank
So I talk about the Vision 2045, yeah, the document from Bappenas. So I directly quote from the document that Indonesia will focus its security and defense development in order to deter the following threats: separatism, radicalism or terrorism, communal conflict, natural disaster, and border infringement. Well, I'm not going to discuss all of the challenges here, but instead I will focus on only 3 challenges. The first one is the separatism. So this is my general assessment about separatism in Papua. So conflict in Papua is unlikely to be resolved soon. Data from various sources show that the West Papua National Liberation Army, TPNPB, has intensified indiscriminate deadly attacks against the Indonesian military and police personnel, as well as civilian and non-combatant. The Papua Liberation Army also seems to gain more manpower and weapons. Armed attacks occur in new locations, indicating the growing maneuverability of the Liberation Army. Army General Andika Perkasa, former Kasat, former Panglima TNI, put the conflict resolution in Papua as one of his priorities. He claimed to shift the TNI policy on Papuan conflict from previous security approach to social approach through the intensification of territorial operations. Troops stationed in conflict-prone area have to establish communication channel with local population to nurture good relationship with the society. The newly appointed Panglima TNI, Admiral Yudo Margono, also stated that he will continue the non-coercive approach in Papua. The result of the strategy, however, remains to be seen. The second challenge is communal conflict. Since the signing of MOU between the Indonesian government and Free Aceh Movement, GAM, in 2005, we see no more major scale communal conflict in post-authoritarian Indonesia. But in the last 15 years or so, also there is no massive communal conflict in the country. Despite such positive security environment, the government remains worried, supposedly so, that horizontal conflict can still erupt anytime in the country. Discrimination and persecution against minority groups seems to increase in recent years, as several reports indicated. Therefore, the possibility of horizontal conflicts remains on the government's and the military's radar. Okay, on the third challenges, the terrorism or radicalism. So as the last member of East Indonesia Mujahideen or the MIT is founded in October 2022 last year, MIT is no longer believed posing a security threat. The Regional Police Command in Central Sulawesi stated that an offensive counter-terror mission, which is to locate and eliminate the MIT members, has come to an end. The police, in coordination with local administration, has been shifting its missions towards territorial operation, which is a de-radicalization program with the objective of pacifying the local population at large. Herewith, the TNI counter-mission will be slowing down. Meanwhile, the Army Territorial Command or the Komando Territorial, KOTER, will remain conducting surveillance and detection roles. So next, I'm going to discuss the impact of post-COVID-19 challenges to civil-military relation in general in Indonesia. So I will focus on the last 2 points here about the political influence and the stagnated reform. So the bottom line is that TNI, in my view, will have wider opportunity to project its influence more effectively in the society at large and Indonesian political life. First, in post-authoritarian period, MOTW has helped and maintained the continuation of traditional pattern of military involvement on political life in Indonesia. How does it work? The military operation other than war have provided a good venue for the military to demonstrate its contribution to the society. In effect, such positive perception and opportunity can be converted as a political capital for military leaders who aspires to run in presidential race or local election. Throughout election cycles since the fall of President Suharto in 1998, retired officers have participated as presidential candidate or vice presidential candidate. We don't know for sure whether General Andika Perkasa, former Kasat, former Panglima TNI, will run in 2024. But in my opinion, it is fair to say that Andika Perkasa candidacy owes partly to various achievements that the TNI fulfilled during the COVID-19 era. And another contributing factor is indeed the role of his inner circle. The second point of the impact is that TNI contemporary military operation other than war has provided a convenient rationale for the TNI to suspend reform pressure. The perceived imminent threats of food crisis, for example, or terrorism, radicalism, has been used as pretext to maintain the overarching presence of territorial command, KOTER. And to some extent, the continuation of the appointment of active military personnel on high-level civilian positions. Various reports from the leading civil society organizations in Indonesia find that the Army Territorial Command has suppressed public liberty and intimidated student activists in several locations in Indonesia. This reminds us about the role the Territorial Command had during the authoritarian order regime. Following the President Suharto resignation in 1998, student groups and other democratic elements in the country urged the modification of Territorial Command structure so that the Territorial Command would not overlap with civilian regional administration, as what had been the case during New Order. However, so far nothing has changed. In fact, the number of Territorial Command is increasing, as in the case of West Papua region. Okay, about the prospect. So following the continuing dynamics of non-defense or non-traditional threats in Indonesia, I think MOTW is likely be more frequent and intense in the future in Indonesia. The roles of TNI will be needed in some areas, particularly on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, border security, VVIP security, and international peacekeeping operations. With that in mind, I would like to conclude my presentation with the two following critical points. So based on experience so far, we can see that MOTW has its own downside. Therefore, in the future, Indonesia should implement the MOTW more cautiously. What do I mean by that? While acknowledging the contribution of TNI on domestic non-combat mission, MOTW also entails hefty risks. The first one is, considering the state of democratic backsliding in Indonesia in recent years, I think we are justified to have reasonable concern that the intensification of TNI non-defense mission can further undermine civilian control. I think this is related with Pak Joni conclusion in previous session. On one side, TNI sees high values in maintaining their presence within Indonesian society, while on the other side, civilian elites and executive and legislative agencies also have neither incentive nor pressure to halt such normalization of military presence. Secondly, as discussed by David Pion Berlin on the case of the Latin American militaries, over-reliance on the military to conduct domestic missions could diminish incentive to improve civilian agency that could carry out similar roles. Indonesia, of course, needs a more capable and stronger, for example, National Disaster Management Agency, BNPB, or Search and Rescue Agency, Basarnas. Well, so far we have yet seen this problem. Division of labor between these different agencies are going relatively well. Nevertheless, we need to remember that things like this get a little complicated in Indonesia because civilian agency like BNPB and Basarnas used to be directed by either active or retired military officer. Because as Pak Joni has mentioned before, because TNI law allows such secondment. So with that last points, I will end my presentation. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Thank you, Mbak Rene, and I welcome any questions or feedback from the audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bapak Dr. Haripin, for the compelling presentations. Maybe that take more on the critical side, ya, Pak, ya. And maybe let me try to sum up a little on your thoughts from the beginning. So we have first, we have a lot of type for the MOTW in Indonesia, and maybe the main challenges lie on the security and development sector. And then second, it is maybe interesting to note that the securitization of food crisis and then the political influence and the stagnated reform as the impacts that we can observe on the civil military relations. And maybe the last one, there are actually prospects for the intensification of the MOTW and maybe how the civilian agency can be improved, especially maybe relating to democracy. And now we are moving on to the Q&A session, the discussion session. We have few questions here. Maybe I'll just read it to you, Pak Haripin. This is one question. Is it ideal to use the MOTW, the military operations other than war approach, on the armed violence group in Papua? Or maybe do you have any other suggestions on that so it will be successful, maybe similar to Free Aceh movement that you have actually mentioned earlier? Maybe you can elaborate more on that. That's the first question. Do you want to answer first, or should I read more question? Maybe I think you can answer that first.
Yeah, one by one.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think you can
okay.
start with that maybe, Pak. Silakan.
Yeah, I think the new approach as initiated by Pak Andika and then continue by Pak Yudo is a good sign from the TNI to shift the approach from security approach to the more societal approach in Papua. So I think as I discussed in my presentation, we don't know for sure the result as for now because it's still going on. But I think what we did in Papua is a more social and non-coercive approach. By looking at the data, we know that the number of victims from the armed assault from the the Liberation Army mostly coming from the civilians, from the non-combatant. And I think that also needs a swift response from the law enforcement officer, but also for the military. But I think looking at the history of conflict in Papua and the local dynamics, not to mention about the new autonomy law, yeah, and then the pemekaran, yeah, the what is it, the yeah, the new province, yeah, the new province in Papua has, yeah, in my view, has created or has inflicted some instability in the region, some dissatisfaction among political elites, local political elites there. So I think the TNI and particularly or in general, the Indonesian government must really careful in handling the situation in Papua.
Okay, thank you for the answer. We go to the second questions. This is interesting. How will Indonesia strengthen the health sector through defense diplomacy in the future, facing a similar pandemic from TNI's perspective, maybe? You can
Yeah, I don't know for sure about the answer for that question, but I am aware that IDMM has some interesting initiative on that issue, yeah, on the military medicine. But in the case of TNI itself, I think as already mentioned by Pak Joni, yeah, since Panglima Pak Hadi, TNI also has has more focus on military medicine, yeah, so including from the Ministry of Defense. So in terms of cooperation or international cooperation, defense diplomacy with other partners, yeah, I think if you take a look at the documents, we see also some increasing cooperation, yeah, with regional partners. So in that sense, yeah, as I say in my presentation, in whatever type of MOTW, I think MTW will be more intense and will be more frequent in the future. So yeah, there are 14 types of M2W, and it is also fair to say that we cannot generalize like whether M2W is good or bad for the TNI or for the democracy, but we can assess the M2W case by case or operation by operations.
Okay, thank you, Pak. This is the third question. This is new for me as well. It's interesting, this one. How do you think that MOTW in the form of civil engineering projects, maybe similar to the role of the US Army Corps of Engineers, would undermine civilian agencies such as Kemen PUPR or the Ministry of Public Works and Housing? Maybe you can answer that. I think this is also new for me about civil engineering projects. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they have quite different roles. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, they perform a similar function. Yeah, but in terms of the purpose, they have quite different purpose. But if we take a look at the case of in Aceh, for example, in 2004, or in Poso 2018, and in other HIDR missions. Yeah, so the contribution of the army engineering is quite high, yeah, but I don't see it as there is a problem of overlapping, yeah, in terms of between the army engineering corps and the civilian agency, yeah. I don't see any overlapping problem there, but of course we also remind as I concluded in my presentation, the non-existent of overlapping should not make us over reliance to the TNI. Yeah? So we still need to keep the balance between the military and the civilian agency in conducting MOTW in various types of operations.
Okay, well, this is a follow-up question, though a bit controversial. Do you have any comments on maybe like the printing rice fields program or the food estate program? Is this part of the military operations other than war that is ideal for the TNI to have this program maybe?
Yeah, yes, I actually prefer. Yeah, I actually plan to discuss about that extensively in my presentation. because due to the some of the data and etc. I chose to drop that topic. But the bottom line is I am the I disagree with the military involvement on the food estate or lumbung pangan program essentially, because in my view there is also data stated that for example is we take a look at the global hunger index. The report said that the hunger index in Indonesia is in moderate level, so there is no basically the food crisis in Indonesia, in my view, is a blatant practice of securitization. And the second is that we can still improve the productivity of the available or the existing farmers all across the country. So no need to open new farming land or to mobilize the troops to participate in the program. And thirdly, also I think the government should use another agency to work on that program, and let the TNI focus on another things, another security related affairs in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, Pak. We can move on to the next question. I'll just read it. On the Sea Patrol, a mission which both have the military and civilian profile coordinated by the Navy or TNI AL, and then Coast Guard, Bakamla, and also the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries or KKP. Is such missions or operations also constitute as military operations other than war from the TNI? Maybe that's the first question. And the second question is on the issue of budget or effort allocation on developing both civilian and military institutions. How about on such close collaboration between institutions, such as in the case of Sea Patrol? Maybe you can answer that.
Okay, Mbak Rene,
questions.
sorry. Could you please repeat the first questions? I don't really get it. Yeah.
Oh, the first questions is about the missions or operations such as Sea Patrol, because it involves a lot of part like the military and civilian profile, so such as from Navy, TNI AL, and also involving Bakamla, but also involving the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, jadi with KKP as well. So is this constitute as MOTW from the TNI, maybe, Pak?
Yes, that's part of the TNI AM2W. The short answer is yes. So according to TNI, it is part of their duty to secure the border area.
Maybe what about the budget or effort allocation? How do they manage between the like TNI and then Bakamla and also KKP, between these three institutions, such as in the case of Sea Patrol, maybe? How they collaborate or how the budget allocation, if you can.
I don't know for sure the details about the budget allocation, but I think every institution have their own budget to conduct the mission. So like Bakamla and Kemhan or TNI has their own budget to do the sea patrol. So the problem, I don't know, is it the problem or not? But I think the one issue is how to make it effective, because if in the sea patrol involves so many parties, so many agencies in the field, there are some complexity regarding the technicalities of sea patrol. So I think the problem lies with the coordination, but in terms of budget, I think there's also a problem there, but I cannot answer more than that because I don't know the information or the data about it.
You cannot go into the details, but roughly about the coordination, about the agencies, you can answer that. Okay, Pak. Moving on, and then next question. There's an attendee asking, if I'm not mistaken, from listening part of your speech, you mentioned that the condition of the role of territorial unit during the government of Order Baru, the new order, and now it's not different. Maybe you can please clarify a bit detail what you mentioned about that, and maybe you can provide some examples that happened recently, maybe during or after the Reformation era.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, because my standing point is based on the early the democratic aspirations in 1998. Yeah. So at that time, the students movement and other democratic elements in the country wanted to radically demolish the territorial command. Yeah, but of course the military rejects the idea gitu. So the compromise is to restructuring the territorial command. What do I mean by there is no difference between the territorial during the New Order and post New Order era, because in terms of function, the surveillance and detection and etc. The territorial command nowadays is exactly doing the same thing from my point of view and from my interview and observation in the field, because every day they are checking about the so-called astagatra, in Indonesia we call it the overall security political situation in Indonesia. They monitor monitor everything, from the food prices, from the maybe student demonstration in the nearby area, and etc. So there is no difference between the represents of the function territorial command from the previous authoritarian era to current democratic area. The difference is that, of course, this is the political weight, the political component of that structure. Well, in the past, the territorial command was really powerful, really strong, but currently the territorial command is not that strong, and they work more implicitly and more conducting intelligence or information gathering.
Okay, Pak. No, not much change lah ya from the previous era and then for now. And maybe because the time is almost up, one last question, Pak. This is quite intriguing. For the 2024 election, if General Prabowo wins the presidency, will it lead to a bigger role by the TNI? Maybe that's the last question. And it's
I don't know for that. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know the answer for that questions, but when Pak Prabowo is appointed by Pak Jokowi in October 2019, I was asked by journalists. I forget the newspaper or the online media. He asked me about how the prospect of Ministry of Defense under Pak Prabowo. So I answer that, I think there will be some kind of militarizations within the MOD, something like that. But apparently my latest article with Mas Adi and Mas Sigit stated on the contrary. So it is a really interesting experience for me, because but I think this is the job of the researcher. So we test our hypothesis, we keep questioning our premises. So for that question, if the Prabowo become president next year, is the TNI role will be bigger? I think the safest answer is to say I don't know.
That's so safe.
Or maybe Pak Leonard know the answer.
Maybe we can ask him after this.
No, I will have to defer to Pak Haripin. He's really the expert. I'm still learning about Indonesia. It's such a complex country to understand.
Okay, maybe we'll leave that off cam, maybe offline we can discuss more about that. So maybe that's our last question. I'm really sorry that we cannot read more of the questions. Maybe summing up a bit of our fruitful discussion with Pak Haripin just now, it's actually the new think the point is the coordination and the balance that we have to find between the TNI and other agencies. Yeah, if it's about the military operations other than war, because after all, it's not the TNI itself that is doing the MOTW. It usually involves other agencies. Maybe that's the main point. So I would like to thank Pak Haripin and also just now Major General Joni about these two wonderful speakers, and also thank you for the committee giving me the chance to be moderator in these sessions. Maybe I will now give the screen back to Dr. Leonard Sebastian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barina Prihandoko. Such an excellent job you've done in terms of expertly managing our morning session, and we appreciate your contribution and your summing up of this morning's presentations. So we will now conclude the morning session, and we will break for lunch, and please remember to return promptly back to the webinar at 2:30 p.m. And of course, selamat siang, beristirahat, makan siang, serta selamat menunaikan ibadah solat Jumat bagi rekan-rekan Muslim. Semoga keberkahan dan pahala selalu menyertai kita. Amin. Look forward to seeing all of you back here again at 2:30. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Leonard, Mbak Rini, Mas Adi.
Thank you, Pak Haripin, Mbak Rina. So good of you to spend the morning with us.
Haripin, so sorry,
Sure,
I cut the presentation this morning.
Oh, no problem at all.
Yeah, poor Pak Haripin, he have to handle everything. But I thought it was very good, Pak Haripin, useful always to have a balance, in terms of allowing us to understand the